Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you this drawing of Magnus Carlsen, the great Norwegian chess player. I used a combination of pencils and other tools, and I'm going to show you how I did it. So let's get to it. First things first, I'm going to be working on a piece of drawing paper which is about 9 times 12 inches in size. I'm going to be using a graphite pencil, a woodless charcoal pencil, like this one, but a shorter one which I haven't spent yet, so I'm going to put it in the pencil holder like this so that I can use it longer. In addition to this, I'm going to be using vine charcoal, this nice thin vine charcoal stick, and I'm also going to be using some erasers like a pencil eraser and a kneaded eraser, and for blending I'm going to be using brushes and tortillons. Anyway, I'm starting with a sketch. And in this particular case, I'm going to be using the graphite pencil both for sketching and later for shading. Oh, and by the way, in addition to the graphite pencil, I'm also going to be using a black colored pencil for shading as well. Sorry if my head is butting in occasionally. I'm going to try to minimize that. So like I said, in addition to this sketch, which I normally do with a graphite pencil, I'm also going to be using it for shading a little bit as well. I'm working on the hair using a combination of charcoal pencil and vine charcoal. The difference is that vine charcoal is a natural charcoal which is softer and easily blended and erased, and vine charcoal and charcoal pencil is compressed charcoal. It's a little bit darker and it's a little bit difficult to blend and remove, but I need it for the darker areas in his hair. Now I am shading the left side of his head a lot lighter, and it's going to appear even lighter once I shade everything around it, because that's the way it is with drawing. Everything is kind of relative, because an area looks as dark as or as light as the area around it. So if I shade the area around the left side of the face, or rather the left side of the head, even darker, all of this is going to seem a lot lighter. And now I'm working a little bit on the eyes using a black colored pencil for precision and vine charcoal to shade those eye sockets, because there's a lot of shadow there. And like I said, the left side of his face is going to be the light side, and even though it seems now like I've put down quite a bit of value on it, it is going to be a lot lighter in comparison to the rest of the face, especially the upper part of the face. The left side of his forehead is going to be a lot lighter because that's where the highlight will be. It's going to seem almost white once I shade everything around it. But my light source is coming, in my reference photo, my light source is coming mostly from the left and slightly from behind, as far as I can tell. So there's going to be a little bit of reflected light on the other side as well. So the lighting on this drawing was a little bit challenging, but at the same time I thought it was what made this drawing interesting. And that's why I picked this reference photo. So now I started working on the lower part of the face a little bit, just to kind of frame the face, and then I will proceed towards the middle. So you can see that here I'm using an even lighter or even harder graphite pencil occasionally for some of the lightest areas. And I shaded the area around the eyes and in the eye sockets, and later I'm going to do the pupils, because I noticed that one of the mistakes that I often make, and which happened to a lot of other people as well, is that I sometimes don't put enough value into the eyes themselves, into the whites of the eye, and the highlights sometimes appear too light. So because the eyes are in the shadow here, And because Magnus has such a high forehead with this sharp transition between the eyebrow area and the nose, there's going to be a lot of shadow there. So I really need to try to shade that properly to capture to try to capture the topography of his face. Now, as you can see, I also pulled a few highlights on his hair, which is kind of slicked to one side and upwards. And once again, I did the hair with a combination of vine charcoal and a charcoal pencil. So I zoomed back out a little bit to show you what I'm going to do now. I'm going to shade the background, and I'm going to shade carefully around his hair and head. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I really want the light side of his face and the highlights on his head and hair to stand out against the background. I'm going to do this shading with vine charcoal, because once I blend that vine charcoal, there's going to be very few lines, there's going to be hardly any, there isn't going to be any texture, because vine charcoal is easy to move and manipulate. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to produce a smooth grayish mid-tone for my background, against which the highlights on my subject will stand out. And now I'm blending that with a soft brush and occasionally with a Q-tip. I'm trying not to press too hard because I really want to blend this smoothly. And it's okay if you need to go over it a few more times, because that helps to make it more even and to remove that texture. Being thorough with the shading of the background helps to avoid too much texture and variation. And now I'm putting in a little more work in these eye sockets and on the other areas of the face, especially here between the nose and the forehead. Like I said, that transition is going to be very sharp. He has a very peculiar, very characteristic forehead. And I'm also shading the left side of the face, which, like I said, now looks quite a bit lighter, but there's still a lot of value there. So if I left it completely white, and now you can see that it would look pretty flat against this background. Sorry. So that's why all that initial shading was necessary. And now a few more words about this approach, where I shade the background. Here you can see how I'm leaving the white space for the highlight, even though it won't be completely white because I already went over it with a little bit of vine charcoal. But it seems very light, it seems almost white because of the contrast. Now I started talking about the background. You could try to work on toned paper, toned grey paper. That could also work, but you'd have to use either white colored pencil or white charcoal or white chalk. But I think that shading with vine charcoal and creating your own toned paper in this way doesn't really take too much time. It's actually not very time consuming, and it's not that difficult to produce a fairly even tone. It just takes a little bit of blending, and it has its advantages because I think I kind of always prefer to create my highlights by leaving the white space and by removing them with an eraser. Maybe it's just because I'm used to working that way, but I just find that the highlights that I created that I create with a white pencil or white charcoal, they don't look quite as good, which is why I tend to prefer this approach. I do work on toned paper every now and then, but as you can see, this is just as good. You can just shade the area around the face and it looks like it was drawn on grey toned paper. It just an additional half an hour or hour of work, maybe even less than that, but it actually produces very good results. I'm making some good progress on the shading of the face and the beard, as you can see, but the hairs and the texture of the beard needs a lot of work, so this is time consuming, and obviously it requires patience. And also I need to work a little bit more on the shape of the face and on achieving the likeness, because all of these shadows are kind of confusing and I really have to pay attention to my reference photo. And now you can see that I'm using a pencil eraser to go back in and pull some highlights both on the hair and on the face. A few words about my subject. If you don't know him, he's a famous chess player, probably one of the greatest chess players of all time, and probably the best chess player at the moment. I'm not a very good chess player myself at all. I just found that Magnus was an interesting character to draw. A great chess player, and also an interesting and charismatic individual. Now I'm doing the same thing with the right side of the paper, of the background, trying to create that grayish mid-tone. And I'm also going to be working on his shirt and jacket once I finish with the background and make it smooth enough. So here you can see I made this area a little bit darker, so I actually had to take away a little bit of the value, and that's easy to do with vine charcoal. You just go over it with a paper towel, and the paper towel kind of lifts up the excess charcoal and makes it lighter, while at the same time leaving it smooth. So that's one of the good things about vine charcoal. And by the way, the vine charcoal that I'm using now, and I bought it recently, I honestly don't know which brand it is, but it's a lot thinner than the vine charcoal I used before, but I'm quite satisfied with it. It works pretty well. They look like tiny twigs, but it's a very, very useful drawing tool to use in combination with other types of charcoal pencils. I'm going to do this jacket with woodless charcoal pencils because I want it to be a little bit darker. And now I'm going to shade everything around it with vine charcoal to make it look like a vignette. Now normally when you do a vignette, you don't shade the background, but here I wanted it to look like it was done on grey toned paper, so that the subject is popping out of the greyness of the paper, but at the same time the lower portion of the portrait is kind of fading into that background. So I think I created a nice looking vignette. I just have to put in a few details on his shirt. And it was at this point that I started to wonder if I maybe need to add a few more elements to my drawing, and you will see what I came up with. I just have to do a little bit of work on the shirt, just do a little bit of shading even though it's white, I can't leave it completely white, so I have to shade it because it has its shape as well, and there are darker and lighter areas, and I'm pulling some highlights to show those lighter areas. And here I decided to do a little bit more sketching and to add a few more elements to my drawing. I decided to add a few chess pieces in the background. And I could have just left it like that as a regular portrait, but I wanted to do something a little more interesting. And when you have an idea like that, don't be afraid to experiment and maybe add something original or creative or new to a drawing. So my idea here was to leave, of course, Magnus in the center, and I'm going to put some black pieces around him. I'm going to put the black queen on his left, and now as you can see, I'm working on the queen piece, and I'm working with my vine charcoal because I want it to be a little bit lighter. And as you will see, I'm also going to make the bottom part of the chess pieces fade into the background. I'm going to create a vignette out of each of these chess pieces as well. I just have to shade the queen by adding some darker areas and some highlights, keeping in mind where my light source is. So my light source is coming from a little bit from the left with a little bit of reflected light. So I have to try to imitate that on my chess pieces as well. So there's the queen. Next to the queen, of course, is going to be the bishop. And now I'm working on the bishop. And I'm going to add two more pieces on the right side. It's going to be another bishop. And of course, it's going to be a knight. But unfortunately, as you will see, I didn't realize I wasn't recording when I drew the other bishop and the knight, so I can only show you the finished version. And now I'm adding a little bit more charcoal to the lower right portion of the drawing because that's where I kept my hand and my glassine paper, so I must have lifted up a little bit of that vine charcoal, so I'm trying to make that a little bit darker and a little more even. And once I finish that, I'm just going to cover these two white areas where the tape was. And this is the finished drawing. I'm just going to put down my signature. So there it is. That's my finished drawing of Magnus Carlsen. I hope you enjoyed this portrait, even if you are not a chess player yourself. And you should also check out my other videos. Here's a little bit of zoom for you to see more of the detail. And don't forget to subscribe and give me a like and comment on my videos. Thank you for watching. Bye.